You probably think the word samurai means warrior, the sword, armor, a man ready to die for his lord. That's the image we've inherited through movies, games, anime, and pop culture. Heroic, almost mythological, so familiar that questioning it feels unnecessary, as if the meaning has always been obvious, fixed, unquestionable. But the truth is more surprising, and far more human, because samurai did not originally mean warrior at all. It didn't mean fighter. It didn't even mean soldier. The word samurai began its life with a meaning that feels almost disappointing compared to the legend. One who serves. And that single idea, service, quietly shaped one of the most mythologized figures in human history. To understand where the word samurai truly comes from, we have to go back to early Japan, long before katanas, bushido codes, or dramatic last stands on moonlit battlefields. We have to step into a world where power wasn't held by warriors, but by court nobles, scribes, poets, and aristocrats, ruling from behind layers of ceremony, silk garments, and rigid hierarchy. In that world, violence was not glamorous. It was necessary, but distant. In classical Japanese, the verb saburau meant to attend, to wait upon, or to serve someone of higher rank. It described closeness, not aggression, presence, not conquest, loyalty, not combat. Those who saburau were attendants, guards, aides, household retainers, whose primary role was not to fight, but to be there, to stand near power, to respond when called, to protect status, order, and continuity. Over time, the noun form saburai emerged, literally, those who serve. Only later did pronunciation evolve into what we now recognize as samurai. This shift wasn't dramatic. It was gradual, almost invisible. And that matters, because it tells us something essential about the samurai identity. At its core, a samurai was not defined by personal strength or individual ambition, but by relationship. A samurai existed in reference to someone else, a lord, a household, a lineage, a cause. No master, no samurai. This distinction becomes crucial when we look at the earliest historical samurai, because they were not elite warriors in shining armor. They were functional people, often low-ranking, living far from the imperial court. Their duties included protecting land, settling disputes, escorting officials, collecting rents, and maintaining order in unstable regions. Japan at the time was fragmented. Central authority was weak. Communication was slow. Powerful families owned land across vast distances, and those lands needed constant supervision and defense. The people hired to do that work were practical men, often farmers during the day, fighters only when necessary. They weren't knights. They weren't nobles. They were servants with weapons. And that's where the identity of the samurai began to harden. As local conflicts increased and rival clans competed for territory, these serving men found themselves fighting more frequently. Skill with weapons became valuable. Experience mattered. Loyalty became a form of currency. Over generations, families specialized in this role, passing down knowledge, alliances, and obligations. Service slowly became hereditary. Still, even as their military importance grew, the word itself did not change. They were still called samurai. Still, those who serve. What makes this even more interesting is that another word already existed for warrior in Japanese, bashi. Bu means martial or military. Shi means man. A bashi was literally a man of war. And yet, over time, samurai eclipsed bashi in everyday usage, not because it sounded more impressive, but because it expressed something deeper. Not what these men did, but what they were. A bashi could fight. A samurai belonged. That distinction became even more important as Japan entered the feudal era, when power shifted away from the imperial court and into the hands of military governments known as shogunates. The samurai class rose to dominance, not as rebels overthrowing the system, but as servants who became indispensable to it. They enforced laws. They collected taxes. They governed provinces. They fought wars in the name of others. Even at the height of their authority, the idea of service never disappeared. Samurai were bound to their lords not just by contracts or fear, but by social identity. To stop serving was not simply unemployment, it was erasure. To stop serving was to stop being samurai. This is why betrayal was seen as worse than death. If your identity is built entirely on service, then breaking loyalty doesn't just make you a traitor. It makes you nothing. As centuries passed, the samurai class became formalized. They gained legal privileges. They were allowed, and required, to carry swords. They developed strict behavioral expectations. And eventually, they adopted moral and philosophical codes that later became known as Bushido, the way of the warrior. But here's the crucial detail most modern retellings get wrong. Bushido came late. Very late. It was not an ancient, timeless code followed uniformly by all samurai from the beginning. Much of it was written, refined, and idealized during long periods of peace, especially under the Tokugawa shogunate. When samurai no longer fought constant wars, they needed a reason to exist. So service transformed once again, from physical duty into moral discipline. Restraint, loyalty, self-control. The sword became symbolic. Death became romanticized. And the word samurai began to accumulate layers of meaning it had never originally carried. By the time Japan opened to the West in the 19th century, the samurai were already fading from reality. The class system was dismantled. Swords were banned. Military service became national rather than personal. But the word survived. And that's where myth takes over. Western writers, artists, and filmmakers encountered the idea of the samurai at the exact moment when Japan was presenting a carefully curated version of its past, disciplined, noble, honorable. A cultural export. A legend polished by nostalgia and loss. The original meaning of samurai, servant, quietly slipped into the background. What remained was the image. Today, when we say samurai, we imagine independence, strength, and personal honor. But linguistically, the word points in the opposite direction. A samurai is not free. A samurai is bound. Bound to duty. Bound to hierarchy. Bound to someone else's authority. The irony is striking. One of the most romanticized symbols of individual honor in history is defined, at the root of his name, by obedience. And that is precisely why the concept endured. Because civilizations are not built by lone warriors chasing glory. They are built by systems of service, by people who commit themselves to something larger than themselves, even at personal cost. The word samurai remembers that truth, even if we've forgotten it. So when you hear the word samurai, don't just picture the sword. Picture the hand that waits. The presence beside power. The identity shaped not by conquest, but by commitment. Because long before the samurai became legends, they were simply people who stood close, watching, waiting, ready to serve. And that quiet meaning is still there, hidden inside the word itself.